Hi, I'm Dr. Ken Henry, and this is Conservative Commentary. Blockbuster revelations from the Democratic Party insiders have revealed that Joe Biden plotted Donald Trump's election victory. But before we discuss how Joe stuck it to Pelosi, Obama, and Harris, I'd like to ask you for a favor. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe. It really helps us grow the channel. And go to youtube.com/@KennethJHenry and check out our other videos. Well, it seems Nancy Pelosi is pointing the finger at Joe Biden for Kamala Harris's disastrous electoral loss to Donald Trump. Pelosi maintains that if Biden had got out sooner, the Dems could have had an open primary and a stronger candidate could have emerged. Here's what she said in a recent interview as covered by CNN.
One of the most powerful figures in the Democratic Party is putting the blame for Tuesday's historic loss on President Biden. This is in an interview with the New York Times. Listen to Pelosi.
Had the president gotten out sooner, there may have been other candidates in the race. The anticipation was that if the president were to step aside, that there would be an open primary. And as I say, Kamala may have, I think she would have done well in that and been stronger going forward. But we don't know that. That didn't happen. We live with what happened. And because the president endorsed Kamala Harris immediately, that really made it almost impossible to have a primary at that time. If it had been much earlier, it would have been different.
That is Pelosi's view of the race, as she told to CNN contributor Lulu Garcia-Navarro.
But other Democrat insiders say that Biden gave the party the middle finger when he immediately endorsed Harris and thus cut off the possibility of a primary. If you think about it, Biden was angry and hurt by Pelosi and Obama's coup to oust him. And because he worked with her on a regular basis, Biden knew how weak Harris was. In addition, Biden had saddled her with the border fiasco and legislation for which she cast the deciding vote in the Senate. Harris broke the tie on the Inflation Reduction Act, which actually cranked up inflation, and she also cast the tiebreaker on the American Rescue Plan that caused inflation to soar. Biden also knew how bad Harris was as a candidate. He saw her regularly engage in word salad during interviews, and he saw her interactions during the White House meetings. Biden also knew that she would be saddled with her prior ultra-left positions in 2019 before she dropped out of the primary race. You remember defund the police, dismantling ICE, banning fracking, raising bail for criminals who burned down Minneapolis, and the topper, sex change operations for inmates and, by extension, illegal immigrants. Biden's immediate endorsement of Harris was also an FU to Barack Obama. In fact, Obama was so stunned and angry that it took him and Michelle 3 days before they endorsed Harris. Biden was laughing behind his hand. And Biden's garbage comment was no accident. He didn't attend Harris's campaign closing message just 1,000 feet from where she was from his office. Instead, he hopped on a Zoom call with Latino voters, and he knew his comment would steal Harris's thunder and hand Trump a new campaign ad. And the smack him in the ass comment Biden made in his final appearance in Scranton was likewise calculated. Who could really blame him? After all, he'd been in the public life for over 50 years and was, in his view, unfairly pushed out of the race. Take a look at the following interview with a campaign fundraiser who absolutely lays bare Biden's revenge. And please share your thoughts in the comments.
Top Democrats still trying to process Vice President Harris' stunning loss. The former Speaker Nancy Pelosi placing the blame on President Biden and his late exit from the race. Pelosi telling the New York Times, quote, "Had the president gotten out sooner, there may have been other candidates in the race. The anticipation was that if the president were to step aside, that there would be an open primary." Our next guest has recently been vocal about missteps made in the Harris campaign. It's DNC Woman's Chair and Harris surrogate Lindy Lee joining us now. Lindy, we appreciate you being here. This is sort of an after analysis here of what happened with the campaign. But first, talk to me about what's going on. You see here Nancy Pelosi making the case to sort of blame Joe Biden, but it's a backhanded compliment because she's blaming Joe Biden for allowing Kamala Harris to be the nominee.
Right. Well, thank you so much for having me. And what's left unsaid is that she is not forcefully saying that Harris would have been the strongest candidate after a rigorous process. She's not saying definitively that it would have been her. She says it might have been her, but maybe there was an alternative. Maybe it was Josh Shapiro or maybe Gretchen Whitmer, someone who could forcefully litigate the case against Donald Trump. And if you truly believe that Trump is an existential threat, and that's what Democrats have been saying for the past couple of years, then you should have had that process instead of just coronating somebody.
What is the relationship? What has been the relationship throughout the campaign, and what do you think the relationship is today between Biden world and Kamala Harris world?
Well, I have friends, in both worlds. And let me tell you, the relationship was terrible even before the campaign. There was backstabbing. They wanted to hand her the most, least favorable agenda, the legislative priorities. She was stuck with immigration, civil rights, like none of that went
Before
anywhere.
she was even a candidate,
exactly.
you're saying,
And
as vice president.
There was a lot of backstabbing we saw in the press. People were leaking stuff all the time. The White House was leaking like a sieve when it came to Kamala Harris. And finally, in the final year, she was able to stabilize and stop the bleeding of her staff because there was a lot of turnover as well. And we saw the press reports about that. And things have finally started to calm down. And I actually think President Biden, the whole endorsing her 30 minutes after he dropped out, I think that was a big FU to the party. You don't want me, here's somebody that you may not like. But deal with it,
Suggesting that he's sticking the party with Kamala
Kind of like
Harris.
sticking it to the man.
Yeah, but okay, help me understand your perspective on that, because you worked for Kamala Harris.
I didn't. I'm a donor.
You're a donor.
Technically, I'm not on anyone's payroll. I'm not beholden to anyone. That's why I'm here telling the truth. I'm not here to gaslight anybody. This is just the truth.
And what is the truth?
The truth is this is just an epic disaster. This is a $1 billion disaster. Actually, it was $1.018 billion, I think, right? There were $20 million or $18 million in debt.
Right.
It's incredible. And I raised millions of that. I have friends that I have to be accountable to and to explain what happened because I told them it was a margin of error race. I was promised, Jen O'Malley Dillon promised all of us that Harris would win. She even put videos out saying that Harris would win. I believed her. My donors believed her. And so they wrote massive checks. I feel like a lot of us were misled. And even on the night of election night, Will, I looked somebody in the eye and I said, are we going to do this? Are we going to pull it off? She told me yes. And I asked somebody else, like, how are you feeling? He's like, we're going to win Iowa. And I was like, what?
Do you think did they believe this going in? Was there a real sense of false confidence on the side of Kamala Harris? Or did they know they were in store for disaster?
I was wondering about that. I was like, I asked them, are you privy to internal numbers that I am not seeing? Because I study this so carefully, and I just wasn't seeing any basis for that level of confidence. And I also want to remind our viewers that, the Trump campaign was touting all of these incredible empirical data weeks before election night. What Harris is touting was the door knocking. She didn't say anything really about early voting. Now I know it's because there was nothing much to say.
I asked you what the relationship was between Biden world and Kamala Harris world, and you told me it was bad. It was bad predating the campaign. Where does Obama world fit in this? There's. I don't want to break the Democratic Party into these, three fiefdoms because there's probably more. Nancy Pelosi is a huge power player, but Barack Obama, the Obama world, is a huge player. How do they fit in the tension or the happiness of Democrats?
That's a really good question. I want to point out that they waited 3 days. Michelle and Barack Obama waited 3 days to endorse Kamala Harris. It was a silence heard around the world. And prior to Biden's endorsement that no one really anticipated, they were vetting people like Mark Kelly. Kamala Harris wasn't at the top of the ticket. So Biden's endorsement of Harris caught a lot of people off guard, even the chieftains of the party. I really think it was a big FU to everyone. I'm so sorry.
It's all right.